right, so I'm going to welcome you guys. Welcome. It's nice to see you guys. This evening, we're going to finish up our course starting with meditation, doing chanting and meditation like we typically do to start our class. And then afterwards, I'm going to share with you guys this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. We're going to take a break. And then when we come back, I'm going to share what is merit. This is a unique type of Kamma. And then I'm going to share with you continued support on the path to enlightenment and integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life. With this topic of the what is Kamma, I'm going to teach you 4 types of Kamma and how to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing exclusively wholesome Kamma. So you need to know these 4 types of how, what they are, so that you'll then know how to actually extinguish it. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you guys know the chanting. You guys are welcome to join along. Typically what I do by the end of the course like this is I actually don't guide students in meditation. I just do the chanting, because that way you guys can stand up on your own 2 feet and be more and more confident in meditating. So are you guys okay with that if I do that? Okay. So I'll just do the chanting, and then you guys focus on the breath. Anytime the mind moves off, you cut that off and let it go and come back to the breath. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Hotang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso emakeva Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusrang Poto Bhagavati. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมาเกวาโอตังมหาเกวันนังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภาควาติ Hey, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, it's again, good evening to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Good evening. Um, this was our first 30-minute meditation. What I usually do is I build students up slowly but surely without you necessarily realizing what I'm doing, where I'm slowly expanding the amount of time that we're meditating each session so that by the time we get to the end of the course that you've done a 30-minute meditation and you can see what that feels like. Because if it was a stretch for you, then you know where you're at in your practice. And if it was like, oh, wow, that seemed like it was 5 minutes, then you kind of know where you're at in your practice. So this is a good time to kind of check in with your mind and kind of see how that you experience that so that that way you'll know where you're at in your practice. So with the chanting, the way that I time it is from the beginning of the chanting to the ending of chanting. That's how I time that. It's 30 minutes. Okay. So what I'm going to do after I teach you guys the topics for tonight, I'm going to use some time at the end where you guys can just ask any and all questions that you like, random questions about anything you'd like to ask questions about. Steve's over there like, I got plenty. All right. So tonight, what I'm going to be sharing with you guys is what is Kamma and how does it affect me? This is the natural law that the Buddha is helping you awaken to. And in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to know this natural law very clearly. This is what you're using in order to navigate the world and understanding the cause and effect about how to make wise decisions and how to experience wholesome results. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. You've extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma. So I'm going to teach you the 4 types of Kamma, and then I'm going to teach you how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. And just like always, you guys are welcome to ask questions. Here, you guys are welcome to use the microphones, and then online, you guys can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. So first, let's just talk about kind of generally what the natural law of Kamma is. This is a natural law that is functioning at all times and is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. Just like the natural law of gravity. We grew up not understanding the natural law of gravity, and it was affecting us whether we were aware of it or not. And we fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows. We had all kinds of trouble with this natural law. But we might say that now we're fully awake. to the natural law of gravity because we make wise decisions based on this. In fact, if we fall down now and bump our elbow, we might even start laughing. We might think it's kind of funny, right? Where when we were a kid, that wasn't the case because we were living in a world that we didn't understand and we were struggling and having difficulties. But now we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we fully awoke to the natural law of gravity. And you need to awaken to this natural law as well because it's affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And oftentimes people think that it's other people that are causing what they experience. But I gave you guys some examples in the course yesterday where I helped you guys to be able to see that it's your own decisions that are leading to any particular result that you're experiencing. And it's because of this natural law and the lack of wisdom of this natural law that people think that what they experience is good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, God or some entity called the universe, or they'll blame things on other people. But more and more you can peer into this and you can see what the Buddha actually taught on this because you can independently verify it that it's true. So what it is it's cause and effect or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's nothing superstitious. It's not a black cloud that's following you around. I've heard people talk about the natural law of Kamma like a bank account that you can make deposits into. And when you've done enough wholesome things, then you can make a withdrawal out of this bank account. This isn't actually true. If you're making withdrawals out of your karmic bank account, you're going into debt, right? And now you're going to need to experience those unwholesome results. So that's not the way that I would suggest that you think about it. Think about it as a sequence of events, almost like dominoes, that if you push down this domino, there's going to be a sequence of events that occurs and all these dominoes are going to fall down. This natural law is affecting all beings, whether they're aware of it or not. And there's no being or entity that's overseeing this or controlling it. Sometimes people think it's punishments or rewards or who's to blame or who's at fault. It's none of those kinds of things. It's literally the results of your decisions. That's what the natural law of Kamma is. Okay. So in respects to the teachings of the Buddha, we could say that everything and anything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. But these are two quotes here that I'm going to share with you to help you understand what the Buddha is teaching on this natural law of Kamma, because these are two important things that you need to understand at this point in time as you're starting to approach the natural law of Kamma to understand it. So here's this first one, but just keep in mind, these are just only two. There's plenty of things that he taught about this natural law. He says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. So what he's saying here is only you can produce Kamma for yourself. Sometimes you might hear people say like, oh, I'm going to give you some of my good Kamma, or don't rub your bad Kamma off on me, right? So this isn't actually possible. It's your decisions that lead to any particular result. That's what he's saying here in this first one. And then the second one, he says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. So I know that you haven't necessarily had the opportunity to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, because I suggest to people to set that aside. But nonetheless, what he's sharing here is you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Whatever Kamma you do, you're going to experience the results of it, either in this life, the next life, or some future life. That's what it means by some subsequent occasion. So once you come to understand this, that it's you that's producing your Kamma and you can't run and hide from it, the next thing is, well, let me learn as much about it as I can so that way I can make wise decisions about this natural law and how to navigate the world, because I can't run and hide from the things that I'm going to experience. Because if you keep producing unwholesome Kamma, then you're going to keep experiencing this over and over and over again. So here are the four types of Kamma that you need to understand: wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma, old Kamma and new Kamma. I'm going to teach you guys what this is. I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to show you how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. So wholesome Kamma is any decisions that you make that are harmless. Whenever you're making harmless decisions, it will produce wholesome Kamma or wholesome results. And then when you're making harmful decisions, it's producing unwholesome Kamma. Remember, you can't cause other people to be discontent. Just like you cause your own mind to be discontent, other people are causing their mind to be discontent too. But you can cause people harm. Causing them harm would be causing harm to their physical body, to their material possessions, or their reputation. If you cause harm to people's physical body, their material possessions, or reputation, you're now going to experience harm coming back to you. So, for example, this harmless decisions produces wholesome kamma. Right now, you're just sitting here listening to somebody talk. You're not doing anything other than just sitting here listening to me. Right? You're not causing any harm to any living being. That's why there's no harm coming to you. Right? You're producing wholesome kamma. But if you were to be poking the person's eyes next to you, right? If you were poking them in their eyes, you're causing harm now. You're causing harm to their physical body. Your hand's probably going to get swatted away. Someone's going to move away from you. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Then this is the unwholesome kamma that's coming to you from making that harmful decision. Okay. Then there's something called old kamma and new kamma. What old kamma is any decisions you made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now in the present moment. And then any decisions you're making now in the present moment that you're going to experience the results of in the future, that's your new kamma. So for example, let's just say 3 years ago, I filled out some tax forms to report to the government my income. And let's just say I lied on the tax form. And now 3 years later, I get a notice in the mail that says, you owe us $3,000, $1,000 for the initial amount, $1,000 for penalty, and $1,000 interest. You now owe us $3,000. This is old, unwholesome kamma because I made a choice to steal in the past. And I made this unwise choice to steal material possessions. And now I'm going to experience this unwholesome kamma. This is old, unwholesome kamma. Well, now in the present moment, I have a choice to make. I can make certain choices, and whatever choices I make is going to produce new kamma. And whether it's wholesome or unwholesome is going to depend on my decisions. If I didn't understand these teachings of the Buddha and I thought I could run and hide from this, I might rip up the piece of paper and throw it away, right? But if I understand that that's not the case, that I know that's the last thing I'd be interested in doing. Or if I didn't know these teachings of the Buddha, I might call up the government or I might write them a nasty letter and I might kind of complain and argue and be festered and frustrated with them and talk really bad to them on the phone or in this letter. And now I'm producing new unwholesome kamma, right? Ripping up that piece of paper and throwing it away, I'm producing new unwholesome kamma that I'm going to need to deal with in the future. But if you understand your goal in this journey in life, in this path is to extinguish your old unwholesome kamma, then when this old unwholesome kamma comes back to you, in the present moment, I need to make wise decisions. And this is going to produce new wholesome kamma. So now I might call up the government or write them a letter. And I might say, oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. It looks like there was an oversight on my tax form. And I would like to take responsibility for this. And I would like to make amends, but I don't have $3,000. I'm so sorry. And now I'm being polite and kind and friendly and respectful to them, using right intention, right speech, right action. I'm also practicing right view because I'm accepting responsibility for what happened here. And now they say, you know what, sir, you're being so kind and polite. I tell you what, we're going to drop off the penalty. We're going to drop off the interest. You just pay us $1,000 and we'll be just fine. And I'll say, wow, that's really great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But you know what? I don't even have $1,000. Is there something we can do here? And they say, you know what? How about if we work out a payment plan? Could you pay us maybe $50 or $100 over the next several months, and then we can get rid of this debt that you owe? Oh, excellent. This sounds wonderful. Now we've worked out a solution here. So I've produced new wholesome kamma. In the present moment, I've now extinguished this through organizing this payment plan. And now if I make the payments, I've fully extinguished this old unwholesome kamma. And I know now, don't lie on my tax forms. This would be really unwise for me, right? Because that's what the Buddha teaches us, not to lie, right? So this is old kamma and new kamma. Old kamma is any decisions you made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now. And then new kamma is any decisions you make now that you're going to be experiencing the results of in the future. So this is an easy way to think about this. But also, this is connected to something that I taught you yesterday. This is the words of the Buddha, which is actually giving you the real detail of how you're producing unwholesome kamma. It's from craving, anger, and ignorance. This craving, anger, and ignorance is where you're producing your unwholesome kamma. If you have even the slightest tinge of craving, anger, ignorance in your interactions with others, you're going to be producing unwholesome karma. Or in your decision making, you're going to produce unwholesome karma. So remember that craving is your selfish desires, your mind's longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection. When you're making decisions through that, you can see in your life that it's produced unwholesome results. When you've made decisions through anger, hostility, and bitterness, ill will, it's producing unwholesome results for you. And then when you make decisions through ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, a lack of wisdom of this natural law and all the other teachings of the Buddha, you will produce unwholesome karma, right? So this is how you're doing that. And then the way you produce wholesome karma is through the wholesome roots, because those were the three unwholesome roots: craving, anger, and ignorance. But then you've got the three wholesome roots, which is generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. When you make decisions through those, you're only going to produce wholesome karma. The generosity is giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. Your loving kindness, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And then your wisdom is the wisdom of these teachings, right? So this is what's producing the wholesome karma. So what you're doing is you're gradually bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance through training your mind with the Eightfold Path and all the other teachings. And then you're gradually increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And this is where you'll see over time more and more of your old unwholesome karma is going to be extinguished. If you could snap your fingers today and perfectly practice the teachings of the Buddha, which you can't do, you're still going to experience old unwholesome karma because you made unwise decisions in the past. So you're going to need to learn how to extinguish this. That's what I'm going to teach you next. But do you guys have any questions on what these 4 types of karma are? No questions? Okay, let me see if we have anything here.
You said there are 4 kinds of karma. So there is wholesome karma and unwholesome karma.
Mm-hmm.
There's old karma and new karma.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 4.
Yes, wholesome and unwholesome, and new and old. 1 second, I need to make it. Okay, test, test, test. You guys should be able to hear us now online. Okay. All right. So yes, those are the 4 types of karma: wholesome karma and unwholesome karma, old karma and new karma. Those are the only 4 types of karma that you need to understand in order to make your way to enlightenment. Yep. Okay. So let me just. All right. Just made it. I was interested to make sure that I covered all the things that people were saying there. All right. So now I'm going to teach you how to extinguish your unwholesome karma. Okay. So, like I mentioned, if you could snap your fingers right now and instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha perfectly, you'd still experience unwholesome karma because you've produced unwise decisions in the past through craving, anger, and ignorance, and you've got to experience that. You can't get to enlightenment without experiencing all your old unwholesome karma. But as it's coming back to you, you would like to extinguish it, essentially like bury it in the sand, right? So I'm going to explain to you guys how this works, and then I'm going to give you some examples from my life so you can see this. Okay, so one of the ways that I think about this is as we go through life, it's like putting mud in our garden hose. We've been putting mud in our garden hose. That's what the craving, anger, and ignorance does, is you're sitting there shoving mud into your garden hose. And then you realize at some point, oh my gosh, I need to fix this. I'm not interested in experiencing this anymore. So you kind of hook your garden hose up to the faucet and you open up the faucet. Well, if you're reading a book like once every 6 months, if you're meditating once a month, if you're coming to learn or learning with resources like this, once a month, okay, you're just learning, very little and meditating very little. You're not going to get all this mud out of your garden hose in this life. But if you open up that faucet wider and wider and wider, you get lots of clean water going through your garden hose, where you're meditating 2 or 3 times a day, you're regularly learning in classes, you're learning from the resources that are being shared with you with the original words of the Buddha. You've got lots of water, lots of clean water coming through this garden hose, but it's going to spit mud for a while. right? You're going to see muds coming out of the garden hose. But if you keep putting clean water in the garden hose, it's going to be mud, 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 but then it's going to be clean water. And then it's going to be mud, 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 clean water, mud, 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 clean water, clean water, clean water, mud, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, right? So as you're journeying on this path, you need to put wise decisions into your life. This is called discernment. The Buddha taught to always make decisions based in discernment. So you'd like to make wise decisions in all situations. That's what's going to produce wholesome Kamma for you. But in the meantime, you still have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. So you're still putting mud in your garden hose to a certain degree, even as you're training your mind. But you get to a certain point where you bring your practice up to the Eightfold Path, and now you live your life that way for an extended period of time. So it might take you a few years just to get your life up to the point where you're at the Eightfold Path and you're making decisions 100% wise from that point forward. And now you can start making wise decisions, and now you're extinguishing all your unwholesome Kamma. You're still extinguishing some of it as you're getting to that point, right? But you're still putting mud in your garden hose as long as you have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. But once you get up and running on the Eightfold Path fully, and you're doing that 100% all the time, now you live your life that way for an extended period of time. And that's what's producing the wholesome Kamma, which is extinguishing all your unwholesome Kamma. Your old unwholesome Kamma that's coming back to you, the way you extinguish it is by making decisions through the Eightfold Path. By making decisions through the Eightfold Path, you're now making wise decisions, and it's going to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. So let me give you an example of this. So when I grew up in a very hostile environment where my mind was conditioned to think that, we should treat people a certain way. And all of us grew up in a certain way, and we have a certain amount of bitterness and hostility and harshness in our mind. And I remember being at a restaurant one time and French fries didn't show up on our tray. And the person I was with was yelling and hollering and screaming at the cashier in order to get the French fries. Instead of just, excuse me, ma'am, it looks like the French fries are not here. Could we get our French fries? Right? So your mind gets conditioned to think that this is the way to interact with people. So when I met my wife, who I'm with now, we've been together for about 19 years. I was on my best behavior, of course, right? When we first met, there's this honeymoon phase that you spend time with someone for the first couple of months. You're on your best behavior, but over time, things kind of get a little bit squirrely. You kind of let the rough edges show a little bit. And I started to be bitter and harsh and hostile with my wife in certain situations, even as my girlfriend before we were even married, right? So I did this for about 11 years, where there were times I was nice and polite and respectful, but there were times where I was bitter and harsh and hostile too. But at the 11-year mark, I decided, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm tired of all these broken relationships. I would like to make this relationship really work. And I started working on my own mind. And as I started working on my own mind, I was being polite, kind, friendly, respectful. I was being calm and all these kinds of things. But I had this old unwholesome Kamma to deal with, that I had been bitter and harsh and hostile to her in the past. So there were times where I would come home and she would just start yelling and hollering at me, right? And this was my old unwholesome Kamma because I'd done these kinds of things to her in the past. Where in the past, I would be yelling and hollering and screaming right back at her. But now, understanding these teachings, I realized that was the last thing I was interested in doing. Because as long as I continued to yell and holler at her, it was just going to keep coming back to me. That's the unwholesome Kamma. So when I would come home and she would yell and holler at me, I would just walk away, right? Let her see that, hey, I'm not angry. You're the one that's angry. You deal with your own anger. And I would just walk away. And I did that for several weeks, right? And I would come home. If she would yell at me, I would just walk away, right? Didn't say anything, just walk away. I didn't go to her the next day and complain and tell her how wrong she was or anything like that. I just walk away. Just let her figure it out herself. And I did that for several weeks. And then after I got more control of my mind, I would come home and she might yell and holler and scream at me. And I would sit there and listen to her and everything she had to say, because I knew this was my unwholesome Kamma. I had to deal with it. I had to experience it, right? So now she was yelling and hollering at me. I just sat there and listened to it. Sometimes I would close my eyes. And then after she'd be done, I would say, thank you, dear. And I'd walk away, right? And I did that for a while. And then after a while, my mind was more controlled. I would come home and she would be telling me how bad of a husband I was and what I had done in the past. And she'd bring up things from 5, 10 years ago, bringing up all this old stuff. And I would just listen and listen and listen. And I would say, what about now, dear? What am I doing now? She's like, you're not doing that stuff anymore. You're always calm now. And I'd say, thank you, dear. And I'd why her and I'd walk away. And slowly but surely, these incidents got farther and farther away because she was extinguishing her anger. Her craving and anger was being extinguished. And she could see that her husband wasn't angry anymore. It was her that was angry. So over the period of a year and a half, she extinguished all her anger. And now it's been 6, 7 years. There hasn't been any arguments at all. Where in the past, when we would have a disagreement, we were both craving. We were both craving permanence and we would be yelling and hollering. It's like two unenlightened beings fighting is like two wild animals fighting to death. I'm sure you've been in those kinds of arguments before where you're trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. And it's almost like two animals fighting to death. And that's what we used to do in the past. But now what this path is you're becoming a better and better human being, right? You're learning how to function like a human being, like a wise human being. So now we understood impermanence, that when we had a disagreement, it's like, of course, right? Where before we were fighting to prove who was right and who was wrong because we were craving that permanence. But now with an understanding of impermanence, well, of course we have a different opinion on things, right? Because that's impermanence. We grew up differently. She's from Thailand. I grew up in the USA. And when we come together and we experience something, we're going to experience having a different opinion. And now it's a matter of just sitting down and she shares her ideas and I share my ideas. And sometimes we walk away from the conversation and she's changed her mind and she'd like to do it my way. Or I've changed my mind and I'd like to do it her way. Or we walk away with a combination of both of us doing it a little bit of each other's way, kind of a blended approach. But sometimes we sit down and talk and we still walk away and I do it my way and she does it her way. And we're completely fine with that. Where before we'd fight to death because we were craving and we wanted each other to be convinced that our way was the right way. So you got to get to the point where you understand that, of course, people have different opinions than you. This is normal. And disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. It just means we have two different experiences in life. And of course, we have different opinions. And we don't need to fight to the death in order to convince each other who's right and who's wrong. Because in reality, there's multiple right ways to do things. There's not just one right way. But the unenlightened mind with ego will think my way is the right way and everybody else's way is the wrong way. And now you'll fight to death in order to try to convince other people that your way is the right way. And you'll be irritable and grumpy and frustrated if people aren't doing it your way. So it took me about a year and a half to extinguish all that unwholesome karma. That early on, it was coming back more frequently, but then it started getting farther and farther between. But then I started seeing some other unwholesome karma that I had to deal with. I noticed my 6-year-old son at the time was talking bitter and harsh and hostile to his mom because he had learned it from me. He saw me talking in unwise ways to his mom, and then he started doing it too. So I not only needed to extinguish my unwholesome karma with my wife, but I now needed to extinguish it with my son because I was interested in them having a healthy relationship, but he didn't have an example of how to do that because he had never seen that before. So now I needed to start teaching him how to have a better relationship with his mom through learning things like the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. And now once I was teaching him all the Eightfold Path and all of these things, now he's got a wonderful relationship with his mom. They don't argue. They don't get upset. They don't get frustrated. They just have conversations, right? So now if you came to our house, there's no arguing. There's no frustration. There's no yelling. There's none of that kind of stuff. It's just people talking and hanging out and having a good time, laughing. And when we're trying to do something, if there's different ideas, we all listen to each other's ideas and we figure out how to do this thing and accomplish this thing. So you can extinguish all your unwholesome karma by improving your relationships. But in order to improve your relationships, you need to improve your own mind. So there's certain relationships that you have right now that there's a lot of bitterness and harshness and hostility perhaps on your side and on their side, and you're not really committed to the relationship, and you'd rather just kind of move on from the relationship. Just let go, move on. You don't have to tell the person this is what you're doing necessarily. and you can just move on from the relationship. That's one category of relationships. There's a second category of relationships of people who you're more committed to, people who you would like to see this relationship improve, but you kind of need to go off and do some work on your own mind and then come back into the relationship. Like I did with my wife and like I did with my mom. That's what I had to do, right? Because I was committed to those relationships. But then there's a third category of relationships, brand new people that you don't even know who their name is right now. And you haven't even met them. When you do meet them, you'll only ever be loving and kind with these people. And you'll only be practicing these teachings that you're learning from the Buddha. And now you'll only have harmonious relationship with those people. So these are the three categories of relationships. People that you're not committed to the relationship and you're not really interested in sorting it out, and there's too much difficulties on your side or their side, and you like to just move on. It's kind of like riding off into the sunset. You don't have to go to them and download all the reasons why you can't be their friend, because all you're doing is listing your cravings, desires, attachments, and your wants and expectations. I can't be your friend because you did this and you did that and you did this and you did that. You're just listing out all your expectations. And now there's going to be a confrontation and there's going to be arguments. And then 2 or 3 years from now, when you see them at the mall, you guys are going to try to avoid each other because now you have produced more unwholesome karma. Instead, just gradually move away from that person. Just not answering their text messages farther and farther between, not going out with them as frequently, just gradually moving off into the sunset. And then when you see them 2 or 3 years from now, 5 years from now, it's like, hey, Barbara, how's it going? Haven't seen you for a while. How you been? Right? Because you guys didn't have this big confrontation, this big explosion. Now you can strike up a conversation. Maybe she's in a different place. Maybe you're in a different place. And who knows? Maybe you guys can rekindle the relationship from a better point of view. So you can't do that if you go to them and you have this big explosion and this big conflict of trying to prove who's better and who's worse. Sometimes people want to kind of stomp on people on their way out of the relationship, but you don't need to do this. Just gradually move on like you're moving off into the sunset. That second category of relationships, those are people that you're more committed to. You need to maybe step away, work on your own mind, and then you can come back into the relationship and you'll experience improvement. And then that third category are brand new people who you don't even know right now. You don't even know their names. You're only ever going to be loving and kind with these people. And that's going to produce wholesome karma for you in those relationships. So this is how you clean up all your relationships and get to a point where they're 100% harmonious. And this is where you need to separate the choices and decisions that people make from the person themselves. Understanding that you're going to disagree with people's choices and decisions, and that's okay. And you can still love the person, meaning have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. So do you guys have a question on extinguishing your unwholesome karma as your old unwholesome karma is coming back to you, making new decisions in the present moment to produce new wholesome karma? That's what I was doing with my wife, where in the past I was just making new unwholesome karma because I was arguing and I was still frustrated and being bitter and harsh and hostile. But instead I was producing this new wholesome karma. And I had to walk through all that old unwholesome karma. I had to experience it before we could get to this place where now everything's completely peaceful. Any questions here?
Say you had a relationship and there was some unwholesome karma
They've passed away. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you can't go looking for the unwholesome karma in most situations. You need to wait for it to come back. So if you're experiencing bitterness, harshness, and hostility coming back to you from other people, then you just extinguish this as it comes up. The only times you can actually go and proactively do this, I'll give you an example. You might like this story because you'll hear that your teacher was not always a good boy. When I was in my early 20s, I had a 4x4 Jeep, and I really liked this Jeep a lot. And I parked it at my friend's house, went inside for dinner, and when I came out, they had towed my car. And I found out where it was in the tow lot, and I went there to go get it, took a taxi over there, and nobody was there. So I jumped over the fence, put it in 4-wheel drive, and plowed through the fence and knocked down the whole fence, right? And I ended up getting the police got involved, right? But they never were able to really make anything stick criminally because they didn't have me as being the driver. There was nobody there that saw me do it. But they sued me civilly, and then they won a judgment of $2,000 against me. And this judgment, my lawyer told me, he said, I've got plenty of these things in my drawer. You don't ever have to pay it. It's just going to sit here in my drawer and it's never going to affect you. You don't have to worry about it. And I was like, okay, no worries. But after understanding this was unwholesome karma, at one point in my life, I decided to reach out to the business owner and I decided to pay for what I needed to pay. I offered him less money because I knew his fence didn't take $2,000 to fix it. It was only $1,000. So he accepted the $1,000 and I paid it. So that was like a proactive way of going to extinguish karma that I knew was out there and I needed to go extinguish it. But those kind of things are more rare, where if it's a relationship based thing like this, you can't really do anything when they're passed away to actually go proactively extinguish it. It's just that as you're experiencing old unwholesome karma coming back to you, extinguish it at that time when it's coming back to you.
So would guilt, like if you felt guilty for something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the karma, is the discontent feelings that's coming back. So you've got to eliminate your craving, anger, and ignorance. And that's what's getting you to the point where you fully extinguished all your unwholesome karma. If you get rid of all your craving, anger, and ignorance, you'll get to the point where you won't have any discontent feelings anymore. That's where you'll know that you fully extinguished your unwholesome karma, is that it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontent feelings whatsoever. Yeah, because from that point forward, you're only, so by the time you get to enlightenment, you've been making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom for an extended period of time. And you're starting to see longer and longer periods of time of peace and joy in your mind, where you'll go 2 months. This is before enlightenment, 2 months where your mind's quite peaceful and joyful. And then something will happen, right? And then you'll deal with that, you'll extinguish that. And then it'll be 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then something will happen and you'll extinguish that. And then it'll go a little bit longer, 6 months or a year. And eventually you'll get to 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontentedness in your mind. There's nothing unwholesome that's coming back to you. But remember, and this doesn't mean everything's going your way, right? Because you still can experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. So you can still experience those things. But when you look at it, you can see that there's no decisions that you made based in craving, anger, and ignorance that produced that. That was just impermanence. That's what that was. But yeah, getting to enlightenment, that's the ultimate extinguishing of 100% of your unwholesome karma, because you're not even experiencing discontent feelings any longer. And the things that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life, everything's wholesome. Everything's going wonderful in your life. You're living the ideal life by the time you get to enlightenment. And you can't imagine doing anything different than what you're currently doing in life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I don't see. Okay. People just saying thank you online. You're welcome. Let me check Facebook and see if we have anything on Facebook. My Facebook account's working again. All right. All right. So now that you're understanding the natural law of Kamma, let me help you to understand the laws of society. Because sometimes when I teach this topic, I've had students say, hold on a second, David, you just taught that we can't run and hide from our Kamma, and that's what the Buddhists taught. But what about that person who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, there was blood all over their car, and they went to court and they were found not guilty? Didn't they run and hide from their Kamma? Well, the answer is no, they didn't. What you're looking at there is you're looking at the laws of society. That's not 100% of the natural law of Kamma. And the laws of society are created and administered and enforced by human beings, so they're imperfect. We should always aspire for more and more equitable laws and fairly administered laws, but we need to understand that because human beings are involved that have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, they're not going to be 100% fair. So when you're watching the news, and you see a certain situation that you think that this person should be guilty and they're found not guilty, don't worry, they're still experiencing their Kamma. You just might not be there to see it, right? And you can have the other situation too, where someone's actually not guilty and they're found guilty. So I'm going to help you guys to see this. So let's take the first example of this person who their bloody footprints at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapons under their bed, there's blood all over their car, but they went to court and they were found not guilty. So here's the other things that they're experiencing, right? Because they didn't run and hide from their Kamma. They're still experiencing it. They just didn't get jail from this human law, that this law of society, because they're imperfect. So they're still experiencing these kinds of things. They're going to experience a bad reputation in the community because there's plenty of people that know about this news, and there's plenty of people that know this person was on a murder charge, and they're going to experience a bad reputation. They can also experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, and a shortened lifespan. The way that this actually occurs is there's nothing mystical or magical. If you have enough craving in your mind to go out and kill another human being, then that means that you have a lot of craving in your mind, and it's producing things like stress and anxiety and worry and despair and all these other feelings, guilt and fear and things like this. And that's all weighing on the bodily organs, the heart, the lungs, the kidney, all these kinds of things. And that's why you're having a shorter lifespan, right? So if you have enough craving to go kill another human being, these are the things that you can experience: sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, shortened lifespan. Also, you can experience hostility, aggression, fights, and even being killed yourself, because it's not like you had enough craving and anger to go kill another human being and all the rest of your relationships are going wonderfully. You're still having difficulties in other relationships too. You can experience a loss of income and wealth, because going away and defending yourself on a murder charge, that's very expensive. You're going to need to expend a certain amount of income and wealth. You're going to have to take off work for an extended period of time to go off and actually defend yourself on this murder charge. You're going to need to spend lawyer fees and things like this. So you're going to lose a certain amount of income and wealth. Also, you're going to have difficulties in other relationships. Again, if you have enough craving, anger, and ignorance to kill another human being, you have other relationships that are very difficult for you too. And you're experiencing all that difficulties and struggles in all those relationships. And then securing and progressing in employment, securing housing, and acquiring basic necessities to sustain your life. If you're renting out a bedroom in your house and somebody applies to come live with you, and you know that this person was on a murder charge, are you going to invite them into your home to live in your home with you? Probably not, right? So they're going to have difficulties finding a place to stay. Same thing with an employment. If you were an employer and you see this person's resume or their application come across your desk, you're not going to be eagerly ready and willing to hire that person. So they're going to have difficulties securing housing and employment, and therefore they're going to have difficulty sustaining their life with basic necessities that they need. So this is their Kamma too, but you're not there to see that stuff, right? That's the natural law of Kamma. And then discontentedness and rebirth itself. If they're experiencing guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety, that's their unwholesome Kamma too. And if they don't do anything about this stuff and they're actually reborn, then they can be reborn into the lower realms. And this is part of their Kamma as well. So you don't have to get all up in arms if you see somebody that you think is actually guilty and they're found not guilty. Don't worry. That's that's the laws of society, and they're imperfect. But the natural law of Kamma is perfect. It's not administered and created by human beings, so therefore it actually operates perfectly. And you can have the opposite side of this too. Let's just say that I was in a gang, and maybe I was in this gang from 18 to 25 years old. And I was out there murdering and selling drugs and beating up people and doing all these other things, but I was never caught for anything. But by the age of 25, I decided to get out of this gang, that I've had enough and I'm done with it. And now let's just say I'm 26, 27 years old, and I've been away from this gang the whole time, but the gang goes out and does some kind of murder or something like that. And somehow it gets pinned on me. And now I'm defending myself on this murder charge that I didn't even actually create. I was off somewhere else. But because of my association with this gang, it got pinned on me. And now maybe I go to court and I'm even found guilty. Because remember, the laws of society are imperfect. I could be not guilty and I could be found guilty. right? And now I go to jail for a murder that I didn't even produce. I didn't even kill this person. But all those murders that I did do that I never got caught for, all the drugs that I was selling, all the fighting and beating up that I never got caught for, now I'm experiencing my karma by going away to be able to have, this period of time in jail and prison. So you can have these different things that are happening, and it is all based in the natural law of Kamma, but the natural laws are perfect where the laws of society are imperfect. So questions here on the natural law of Kamma?
Yeah, I just had a question on, I guess, the wars that are happening around the world right now and the leaders who are propagating wars. I know we've studied that, like, all it is, it depends on the old karma, like what they're experiencing now and what they can or cannot get away with, and they will probably see the result of the karma in some later life. That's the way to look at it, because it seems like the like the people in power are able to get away with a lot of destruction and killing and all this stuff, and not, at least in the in the society right now, not have to pay a price for it.
They're not getting away with anything. Like I said, you're not there to see all these other things, right? A leader who sends people off into battle and they're part of the process of killing, those people aren't peaceful and joyful, right? They're not experiencing complete peace. They're experiencing discontentedness. They're experiencing the natural law of Kamma as well. You're just not there to see it.
That's true, but I think, like you talked about, I mean, this is in the teaching as well, like shorter lifespan
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. But people like living till like 80, 85, 90 years old, that's
Mm-hmm.
like a kind of a normal lifespan for most people right now.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they have, a lot of craving and a lot of attachments and a lot of like, then they have a lot of discontentedness. The the lifespan of people has actually gone up in the last, like in the last 100 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're looking at finite situations. You're not looking at the totality, right? And you're also not factoring in the other discourses that you've studied. You remember the bowl of water and the lump of salt, right? So you're not looking at everything. You need to look at everything in order to be able to see the natural law very clearly. If you're looking at one particular incident, one particular person, and one particular life, you're not seeing the whole picture. You need to be able to see the totality of things. You know that the Buddha taught that different people experience Kamma differently based on the amount of wholesome Kamma that you've produced. So you can't just say this person sent people off to war and they're living a long life, so therefore the natural law of Kamma isn't working here. That's just one isolated situation. You're not seeing all the other wholesome Kamma that they generated in order to be able to now be experiencing that lump of salt. Is it the bowl or is it the river Ganges? Right. So you need to look at the totality of things, but nobody is running and hiding. Nobody is getting away with anything. Every single person is experiencing their Kamma in this life, the next life, or in some subsequent occasion. You can see it in your own life. You can see your Kamma 100%, but you can't see other people's Kamma 100% because you're not in their life all the time and seeing their life all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, is Gamma only when living beings make decisions and they experience those decisions, or is it also when, for example, trees just fall over in the forest because of cause and effect?
Yeah, that is Kamma too, where everything that we experience in a day to day basis and everything that happens, it's all cause and effect. Even a tree falling over, there was a cause and effect there. But it's not based in craving, anger, and ignorance because that tree didn't make any decisions, right? So it's the natural law of Kamma is related to the decisions that we make and how we experience the results of those decisions. But we can also look at it through something like this, an inanimate object, that we see that there's a cause and effect, that there was a storm, the lightning hit that tree, and now it weakened the trunk, and now 3 days later it fell over. That is Kamma as well. but it's not being produced by any of us, but it is a sequence of events or cause and effect.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is where, by the way, this is where we can see that there's no good luck, bad luck, destiny, or fate. There's no beings overseeing this. This is all a sequence of events, and we can see that through situations like this as well. Mhm.
So my question is that can the gamma can be crossed out? So like an example is like if someone like at the first half of life is really interested in killing or hunting or stuff, but later of life is like, oh, I'm not anymore love and protecting those animals.
Mhm.
And would that be crossed out, or they still carry on both karmas moving forward to the future?
Yeah, this is the part that you didn't get because you came in just now, as I talked about extinguishing your old unwholesome karma. You can go back and watch this if you like, or other ones when I taught this, because yes, each individual being, as they're coming into the world, we're all producing unwholesome karma because we don't have wisdom, right? When we're a child, even, we're producing unwholesome karma. Craving, anger, and ignorance is in the mind. So it's not until you learn these teachings and you start transforming the mind that you can then start producing more and more 100% wholesome karma. So getting to enlightenment is to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. So you can do that, but you need to know the wisdom of how to do that. And that's what this talk is about. And that's really what the whole course was about, because the Eightfold Path is what's going to allow you to be able to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. So you need to be able to learn this.
Thank you.
Okay. Don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do is end this section of our class here by just thanking you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to understand. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, I'm going to teach you guys what is merit, and I'm going to teach you continued support on the path to enlightenment and how to integrate what you've been learning over this course into your day-to-day life. So let's take a 20-minute break. It's now basically 5 minutes to 8. So let's come back at 8:15, and that's where I'll pick it up. Okay, so enjoy your break.